Nice. Okay. Good. How often do you make use of your camera? Is it when you have jobs or paid jobs or for creative reasons sometimes? Personally, I take my camera with me everywhere I go because you never can tell when you're going to have the luck to capture the best image. So that's what I do. Okay. So today I'll be showing you how you can transform a good looking landscape photography like this to a much more amazing and much more professional looking photography like this using long exposure photography. Let's get to it. Hi and welcome to my channel where I talk about filmmaking and photography. If you're just visiting for the first time or you've not subscribed, I would advise you to please subscribe because I will be uploading much more interesting videos every week for you to learn, to grow, and to get better. So today I'll be talking about long exposure photography. Long exposure photography is a style of photography that requires you having more than your digital camera. It requires having the right skill set, understanding nature, and having a good knowledge of the best time to take the best shot. So what are the tools you need for long exposure photography? You need a digital camera. It can be a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. Number two, you need a mid-range to wide-angle lens in order to be able to capture, more details, more depth, and to reveal more aspects of your scene. Number three, you need a tripod. Any tripod that can hold your camera very well will do. Number four, you need an ND filter. ND filter is really expensive, but you can start with, the cheaper ones, which you can get on Amazon or on eBay. And, as your work progresses, as you master your art, you can improve on buying a much more expensive ND filter. Here are tips on how to capture long exposure correctly. Number one, you need to study the weather. Long exposure requires that you capture at a shorter speed of average of 30 seconds, which means that a lot of light will fall into your camera sensor and as a result makes your image looks very bright. So you need to understand the best time in the day to capture these images. So the best time from what I've experienced is that in the early hours of the day when the sun is rising, or the early hours of the day when the sun or the brightness is not so much, or during the late hours of the day when the sun is setting or when the day is going down. These are two important time or two good time when you can actually have the good lighting for you to achieve or to shoot at 30 seconds. Number two, check different angles. As much as you need to have the technical know-how on how to capture long exposure photography, it's important for you to actually look around your environment or your location to look at the best angle to capture the image. So take your time to move around to check what angle will be the best for me to capture this image before you set up your tripod. Number three, use tripod. Because long exposure photography is done at 30 seconds on the average, you're likely going to have a blurry effect for any shake that affects your camera. So put your camera on a tripod or on a steady surface where your hand is not going to interfere with the camera at all. So a tripod will be an ideal situation, but if you don't have a tripod, get a steady surface where you can actually place your camera. But if you're using a tripod, please be careful of the weight of your camera versus the ability of your tripod. So in some cases where you have windy situation and all of that, it's better you go with a sandbag to actually make your tripod look much more stronger so that you can be able to carry the camera. Number four, set best composition. Composition is very, very important in any style of photography because it distinguishes the professionals from the amateurs. So take your time to set the right and the best composition. Take advantage of the three layers in composition. Get a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Now, there are a lot of elements of composition that you can use. One of them is the rule of thirds, the leading lines, and so on and so forth. So whichever one you are very, very familiar with, make use of it on the set, and this is going to help your work and get a better result. Number 5, set camera exposure. Now that you've set your camera on your tripod, your composition is right, the next thing you want to do is to make sure your exposure is correct. So how do you do this? Personally, the first thing I do is to make sure I set my shutter speed down to the lowest where I think I want to operate. For my shot, for this shot, I use 30 seconds, so I set to 30 seconds. Then I adjusted my aperture to f14, which gives me enough darkness. Then the next thing I did was to stop down my ISO to 100 because I don't want any grainy effect, any noise by increasing the ISO in that environment and that kind of light quality. So I take a first shot, which is a test shot, which is the next step. Then after taking the test shot, I look at the brightness and all of that. And if I'm okay with what I have, then I apply my ND filter. Then I take the next test shot in order to see the impact of the ND filter. Then I begin to work on my aperture by bringing it back, opening the ring and all of that to f11. At that point, I was able to get the best exposure that I actually prefer, and that actually helped me to capture the right image. After taking few shots, I eventually pick this one because it's well exposed, and when I check my histogram, I discover that it's moving in the right direction without any click. So I'm happy with it. Then the next thing is to work on the edit and all of that. So let's go to that. Before we get into editing, there are basic things I would like to share with you. I personally prefer to shoot in RAW because I'm used to it, and I feel it gives me the freedom to work in post. Some people prefer to shoot in JPEG and all of that. So it doesn't matter what format you shoot at, but shoot with the format that you are much more comfortable with. Secondly, I try as much as possible to get familiar with the environments I want to shoot. So I visit the location more than once, take different shots from different angles, then try to move around to make sure I get the best shot. Because familiarizing yourself with the environment will actually help you to capture the best or the better image. And lastly, even when I don't shoot in RAW and I shoot in JPEG, I still use the RAW filter to adjust my picture, which for me gives me expected results. So let's get into the editing. So the first thing I always do is to review my rushes. My pictures. Yeah, my pictures, because I want to know what I can do with it and which one I should go for. Okay, the first one looks a bit nice. It looks very nice. Not a bit nice, but little dark. Just a little bit dark, which I can actually improve on, but it's better for you to work on an image that is a bit brighter and bring it down. At that point, you're not bringing up any noise, which is really a good thing. So the second image looks really cool, which is nice, more details and more brightness, which is what I'm going to work on. So after making that decision of which of them I want to work on, the next thing is to open it in my photo editor. Personally, I use Adobe Photoshop, okay? You can use any version of Adobe Photoshop for this, tutorial, as long as you understand the environment. Okay? If you shoot in RAW, your Adobe Photoshop is going to open the picture with RAW filter, which enables you to actually modify some things. So after opening in RAW, I look at my picture, then I try to understand, because auto or daylight, I check what weather did I shoot, then I check my has shot and I compare with the daylight. So my white balance, I ensure my white balance is correct. So the next thing I want to do is to work on the picture in general. Then I reduce the highlight a bit, increase the shadow, so that I can restore the loss of shadow details. So I increase the shadows, then I reduce the blacks a bit, increase the white a bit, okay? Then the next thing I always do is just to increase the texture a bit, I don't touch the clarity, I don't touch vibrance and saturation. If I want to add contrast, color contrast, I use another method. So let's move on. Then I go to my curve to see my histogram and how it looks. Then I create a basic S curve. Okay. All right. Then I go to details. I also work with details. I change my details. I think I've done this before. I change my details, I improve my color noise and all of that. So one thing you also need to pay attention to is that anytime you increase details, you are likely going to increase the noise level as well. So as you increase the details, try to increase the noise reduction level as well, so that it reduces the details also. Okay. So for now, I go to, optics. I remove chromatic aberration, which is really necessary. Then I want to check if my lens profile is good or not. So I try to use profile correction. It helps you to actually correct your profile, your picture, so that you don't have a bent size or whatever. So okay. So with this, I think I'm okay for now. Then I click open here. Okay, so in this picture, I have few unwanted elements that I want to remove. Like this one, I think is due to the lens. This one, and probably this ghost, Okay, so to do that, I create a new layer and I turn on my healing brush. I select my healing brush. Then I sample the environment. Then I just rub it down. So before you do that, you need to change your sample from current layer to current and below, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay, so I select current and below. Then I begin to clean up just a little unwanted set of elements. So I just clean them up gently, which is really, it's not going to take time. Yeah. Okay, so I think this is okay for me and I'm okay with it, and that's fine. So the next thing I want to do is begin to work on the contrast, which is very, very important. So I'm going to work on the contrast. For me to work on the contrast, I always use my camera raw filter. Okay, so I'm just going to merge these layers together, Ctrl E. But remember, it's better you have a reference image. So let me just, duplicate this by pressing Ctrl J, Ctrl E or Command E to merge two layers together. Okay, so we have the before and we have the after. Fantastic. So the next thing we want to do now is to work on the contrast. Okay, so I go back to my camera raw filter by pressing Command, Shift, and A. Okay, so I go back to color mixers. Okay, then I look at what I have. I have nice blue, and I have, the other part, which is the cloud. Okay, so now I want to work on the blues. Just want to give it a little more tint, yeah, and the orange as well, just to increase the tint as well. Yeah, that's cool, because the common colors in this picture are blue and the light, which is orange. So you need to pay attention to that, because those are the things you actually work on. You work on the contrast that is available on your set. Don't try to create another contrast, because that can actually alter the beauty of the picture. Okay, with what I have here, and I say okay. Now in fine art photography or long exposure, you can actually improve on the blurriness of, like, the water. If you look at the water, it's quite blurry, which is the essence of long exposure. Or the cloud, we have one color of the cloud, so we don't have pattern on the cloud, but you can see the blurriness on the water. So if you really want more blurriness, there is something you can do. So I'm just going to duplicate this again. Okay, then I go to my filter, I go to blur, and I select motion blur. Okay, so now motion blur will blur based on direction. Okay, now if you look at the lights, the blurriness of the light is coming straight down, so I'm gonna replicate that. So I just select 90 degree, so you see the motion, which is really, really cool. Yeah, so the next thing I want to do is to yeah, that's fine. Then I say okay. So everything looks blurry, which is not what you want, but this is a step towards the right direction. So I'm going to mask it. Just select mask. Then I'm going to select my brush tool. Okay, so select your brush tool. Yeah, and two ways you can actually invert this by pressing Command I to hide the motion blur and paint it where you want it to appear, which is really a nice idea. So now if your layer, your mask layer is black, make sure that your color pen is white. It's a reverse. So if you're painting black on black, it's not going to reveal anything. So white reveals, black hides. So that's the secret. So now I paint on the area that I want the blur effect to appear. Let's see. So this gives you control over your image, which is really, really great. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, that's nice. Okay, so let's see the before and the after. Before and after. Okay, so I'm just going to reduce the opacity a bit, say by 50%. Yeah, that's cool. So I don't want too much. Like I said, I always like my thing to be minimal. So let's see the before and the after. That's fantastic. So if I'm okay with this, the next thing I want to do is to do the last thing, which is color grading. Yeah, so I'm just gonna match the two layers together, and I'll go back to my camera raw filter. Okay, so now the recent versions of Adobe Photoshop comes with ability for you to color grade, color correct, and do a lot of things, which is really fantastic. So I'm just going to use that tool and color grade in just some minutes. Yeah. Okay, so the color grading tools allows you to actually work on individual layers or individual aspects of your picture. You have the mid-tones, you have the highlights, and you have the shadow. So I'm just going to add different colors to these regions and give a better result. So the first one I want to work on is the highlight. So just going to increase the sky, change the tone of the sky a little bit, by working on the highlight, moving it toward this area, Then I work on the shadow. I want the shadow to have more orange, so that the lights can actually reflect, in the dark area, because the orange lights are around the dark area. So I'm just going to improve on that. That's really, really cool. Then my mid-tone, your mid-tone is mostly the major part of, your picture, so I'm just going to work on my mid-tone by making it warm a little bit, just a little bit of warm. Okay, so that is that. So let's see the before and the after. You see, the before and the after. Before, the first one, then we remove the blemishes, and this is the final result. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial, and if you have not subscribed, please subscribe and share with your friends, and if you have any question, kindly drop it in the comment section below or send me a direct email. I'm going to respond at the best, earliest time I can. Thank you, and see you some other time. Bye for now.